Now, I won't be before you long. I know it is Father's Day, and many of you have things planned that you want to do with your dad today. And many of you just want to be alone at this time, and I get it. But um, my family has plans for me, so I'm going to hurry up and get out of the way so we can get to those plans. Um, so our scripture is coming from the 11th chapter of Hebrews, starting at verse 8 through verse 12. Let me read it for you. It says, by faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, of whose architect and builder is God. And by faith, Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. And so from this one man, as he is good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and countless as the sand on the seashore. And we are talking about today hope while the world is burning. I already told you I won't be long before you today. Those pastors that raised me up, they let me know in order for it to be effective, it doesn't have to be eternal. So hope while the world is burning. It seems as though the world is on fire in wake of the murder of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and just recently Rayshard Brooks. It seems as if the world is on fire. And it seems like the world is burning, and I know the world on fire, while the world is burning, could have some negative connotations. When we say the world is burning, what we mean is we don't mean it in a bad way, but what we mean by the world is burning is it's the spark that has been ignited by the murder of George Floyd. While the world is burning could easily be mistaken for the police station in Minnesota. It could easily be mistaken for the Wendy's in Georgia. It could easily be mistaken for the looting of Emeryville and the looting in San Leandro. It could easily be mistaken for our world being doomed to unruly violence and chaos. But that's not what we mean when we say while the world is burning. When we say while the world is burning, what we mean is the movement that has been sparked by the murder of George Floyd. We mean the protests that have been going on here just about in every state and around the world. For instance, protests in Britain and France and Denmark and Italy, Syria, Brazil, Mexico, Ireland, New Zealand, Canada, Poland, Australia, and God, Lord have mercy. Protests are even in the birthplace where it looks like white supremacy started, in Germany. Yes, that's what we mean when we say while the world is burning. When we say while the world is burning, this is what we mean. Y'all forgive me. I have to preach to myself, and I'm trying to encourage myself through all of this. But I believe that there are moments in history and there are movements in history. And yes, my friends, what we are in the middle of here is a movement in history. I think I ought to tell you, we're in the middle of a pandemic. And in the middle of a pandemic, young people have thrown caution to the wind, and they are out there fighting. They are out there fighting the good fight. In the middle of a pandemic, throwing caution to the wind, they are out there fighting the good fight. And if there is going to be any hope, if there is going to be any hope and confidence of our collective future, we got to get behind them and push. Yes, we got to get behind them and push. So we hope for a better collective future for us all. And what hope is? Hope is confidence. Hope is the expectation of God working on our side to do what we ask. I'm going to say that again. Hope is confidence, and hope is the expectation of God working on our side to do just what we ask. Hope says, I know it looks gloomy now, but tomorrow everything is going to be all right. Hope is what Annie was singing about. Hope is what that prophet Annie was singing about when she said the sun will come up tomorrow, but you got to hang on till tomorrow. Hope is what that prophet Annie was singing about when she said, when I'm stuck with a day that's gray and lonely, I just stick out my chin and grin and say, tomorrow, tomorrow, I love you, tomorrow, you're always a day away. Yes, that's what hope looks like. That's what hope looks like. That's what hope is. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. That's what hope looks like. That's what hope is. And in today's text, the author of Hebrews tells of Abraham's hope in God. Yes, the story is about the promise of God and his plans for Israel. And what is key here is Abraham, he's traveling to a far place. He's traveling to a place far from home, and he's out of his comfort zone. He's away from his natural surroundings. And when you're out there like this, you hope that God has it all planned out when you get there. I know it looks like we've been here before. But the truth is that we never have been here at all. We know where we come from, but we don't know where we're going. But we hold on to the hope that God will have it all worked out before we get there. I know that waiting is one of the hardest things to do in life. But hope is able to wait for the fulfillment of God's purposes in God's time. I'm going to say that again so that you get it. I know waiting is one of the hardest things for us to do. But hope is able to wait for the fulfillment of God's purposes in God's time. The text says that Abraham lived in tents. Now, he lived in tents. He lived in tents because he was just passing through. There was no need to set up a permanent residence. He had to be ready to move when God spoke. He had to be ready to move when God spoke. And today, we have to be ready to move when God speaks. We have to be ready, just like Abraham was ready. But we have to be ready to speak for those who can't speak for themselves. We have to be ready to fight for injustice and equality. We have to be ready to defend the defenseless. We have to be ready to preach the good news to the poor, to proclaim freedom to the prisoner, to set the oppressed free. God is speaking, but are we ready? The text says that Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was unable to bear a child. He enabled her to bear children. Now both Abraham and Sarah were too old to have children, but they both had hope that God would work the miracle. They both had hope that God would work the miracle. Now look, it took 25 years from the promise to a baby. It took 25 years from the promise to a baby. But unbelief asks, how can this be? But hope asks, how will this be? Unbelief asks, how can this be? But hope asks, how will this be? And sometimes you just gotta hang on. The old folks at that church I used to come from used to sing a song that said, hold to his hand, God's unchanging hand. Build your hopes on things eternal and hold on to God's unchanging hand. Sometimes we gotta hang on, like that prophet Annie said, until tomorrow. I may not see systemic change in my lifetime, but I got 5 kids that I'm fighting for, and I'm holding on to the hope that that change is gonna come. I'm holding on to the hope that God will answer our cries. I know things don't look good now. I know things don't look so good right now. We're literally fighting for black lives and we're fighting against systematic racism. But I say, hold on to the hope that God will answer our cries for justice and equality. You know, it was about 200 years the Hebrews were enslaved in Egypt, but God heard their cries and he answered. You know, it was about 70 years that the Jews were in captivity in Babylon, but God heard their cries and he answered. And I'm holding on to the hope that God will hear our cries and answer. Just like he did then, I'll know he'll do it again. Just like he did way back then. If we just hold on and cry, God will hear and God will answer. I'm trying to encourage myself now. So I say, don't give up. So I say, hold on to tomorrow. So I say, don't stop fighting. So I say, don't stop telling the story. Don't stop telling the story of a brown-skinned, multi-ethnic Jesus and his passion to save mankind through his death, burial, and resurrection. And he brought us all the good news. And the good news that represents justice. The good news that represents salvation for all. And the good news that represents freedom to all that hears. Good news that is not segregated by race. That is not segregated by color. That is not segregated by social status. He commanded us to preach the gospel to everyone, everywhere. And just like that song said, that there is a fountain filled with blood and is drawn from Emmanuel's vein, and sinners can plunge beneath the flood where they can lose their guilty stains. Oh yeah, I tell you, hold on to God's unchanging hand. Things may look bad now. Things may look gloomy now, but we got to hold on. We got to hold on. Just like he was faithful in answering before, he'll be faithful to answer again. Hold on. Weeping may endure for a night, but I tell you, joy comes in the morning. The text said Abraham stayed in tents because he was just passing through. We're just passing through this earth. We're just passing through. But like the old folks used to say, on that great getting up morning, we are going to a place where there will be no more sorrow, where there will be no more tears, where there will be no more pain, no more death. We're citizens of heaven, and heaven is our home. Does that mean we don't fight while we're down here? No, not at all. Fight for injustice. Fight for the defenseless. Fight for those who can't speak up for themselves. But we hold on to hope that everything is going to be all right in God's time.